So we know in tooth development, we have stages. So we will have our growth stage, calcification stage, eruption, and attrition. That is just basic. We can go more detail and say the growth stage involves the initiation stage with the lamina, the bud, cap, bell. Those are the proliferating stages. Then we get the morpho and histodifferentiation that occurs. And then all of that will go into the calcification and then finally eruption. So main part is to remember the bud cap bell stage and then our dental lamina stage. So let's start. Initiation or the dental lamina occurs around the 6 weeks in utero. And this does look like the teeth, so just remember the outside layer will form the epithelial and the inner layer will form the ectomesenchyme, which comes from the neural crest cell origin. Those epithelial will start proliferating in a downward direction, as you can see. Oops. So they will start proliferating in a downward direction into the ectomesenchyme, and that will form 20 placodes or 20 spots where a tooth will start forming. Then the proliferation of the epithelial happens on the superior border and at the tip ends. So they will start tipping and forming our cap. So once again, in the cap stage, we get our three distinct cell layers: the outer enamel epithelial, the inner enamel epithelial, the stellate reticulum, which is basically the water space, the cytoplasm, if you want to think about it, that provides the space for the cells to grow. And then we have cervical loop, where the inner and outer enamel epithelial meet. Dental sac, which is the surrounding structure where all the periodontium will form, and dental papilla, where the pulp will come in from. So if you want to relate, you can think of something like this. So this is a pulp space where the dental papilla came from. The periodontium came from the outside space. We call that the dental sac. And then the enamel on the top, and then dentin will form in the bottom. So after our stages, then in bell stage, we get the same three layers: the outer enamel, the inner enamel, and the stellate reticulum. We get this new layer of stellate intermedium that gives the enamel layer the nutrients to grow. So in bell stage, we also have two components called morphodifferentiation and histodifferentiation. So by this time, we only have cells. Now we have to tell the cells what type of shape they have to produce. So we call that the morphodifferentiation, if there'll be molars, incisors, or canine. And then histo is telling what cell to become. So dental papilla will become odontoblast, whereas the inner enamel epithelial will form ameloblast. The last layer is the bell stage, and in the bell stage, we have the same outer enamel, which is avascular. We have the inner enamel, which will give rise to ameloblast. We have stellate reticulum, which is basically gag and is like a cytoplasm water fluid structure that gives it space, and sternum intermedium, which is basically nutrition layer for enamel formation. We have odontoblast that we know formed on the differentiated and came from the dental papilla side. And then odontoblast starts secreting the organic matrix of mantle dentin. And mantle dentin is the first dentin that's formed. And then after that will be circumpulpal dentin surrounding that. The main key of knowing that if you are in the cap stage is forming this enamel knot. And an enamel knot is just the non-dividing epithelial cells, and that those will decide the shape of the tooth. We'll keep going. So we have ameloblasts that we said came from inner enamel epithelium. We have the dental pulp, which came from the papilla. We have the dental sac or follicle that forms the PDL, the cementum, and the alveolar. So how does a crown form? So the crown is formed with the help of the cusp step or the enamel knot. And when enamel knot is a non-proliferating epithelial layer, it will start forming mineralization. Will start from that point to cervically to the sides, and that gives it this basically a mountain cusp shape. So once again, mineralization occurs cervically. As you can see, all the structures are growing in downward direction, where the cusp is always non-proliferating, always at the top. Then lastly, we have two laminas. Lamina is basically space. We get the vestibular lamina, which is basically thickening of the oral epithelium. We should know by now lamina, like the first process, lamina is where we have thickening of any epithelial. So this is always lateral to the dental lamina, so the cheek always grows lateral to the tooth structure, whereas the successional lamina is where the permanent teeth will come from. And successional lamina is always lingual to the primary teeth because they're always on the inside towards the tongue. So here you can see you have the tooth that's growing, the baby tooth is growing off the main lamina, but then you also have this vestibular lamina, which will form between the teeth and the cheeks. And then here you have successional lamina, and then the baby tooth growing. So successional lamina is where you will have the permanent teeth. And just know only the 20 placodes will get the lamina because molars do not initiate from their own lamina. No successional lamina because there's no one to succeed, no one to come after. So once again, this figure is just showing how there is lamina for every teeth, whereas molars just kind of grow in the back, and as the jaw grows, they will start erupting. The teeth will come out in the space. Lastly, next lecture we will talk about dentidogenesis, go into detail about how to make dentin, and amelogenesis, how to make enamel.